Good evening and welcome to Lines of Distinction. Following on from last week's episode on the differences between crochet and knitting, we're going a tad more highbrow with an in-depth look at the similarities and divides between art and illustration. Here to guide you through the peaks and troughs of this long-standing feud is Theodore Morley, Professor of Fine Art at Goldsmith University, and the famous illustrator Ariel Bold. Now, let us begin by asking Professor Morley if he thinks there is a line of distinction between art and illustration.
Well, of course there is. Even asking the question is a grave insult against the noble tradition of art. Illustration is a commercialised, cheapened derivative that doesn't even deserve the title of an art form. Take, for example, an artist like Monet, one of the great masters. Can you really compare his exquisite, impressionistic style to, say, the childish scribblings of a Quentin Blake?
I'm sorry, Professor. I really must protest. Quentin Blake may be only an illustrator, but his work is loved by millions and is known across the globe. Surely that level of acclaim marks him out as a real artist? Let's consider someone like Paul Nash, who, just like Monet in fact, painted landscapes resonant with time, place, and beauty, but who readily turned his hand to illustration without losing an iota of his work's aesthetic value.
Yes, well, be that as it may, but think about the fundamental emotive impact a room full of Rothkos can have on their audience in a way that no mere illustration can hope to match.
If it's impact you want to discuss, look at illustrative satire. I mean, political cartoonists like Gerald Scarfe can bring down entire governments in a few brushstrokes.
Don't be so ridiculous. Anyway, this is all beside the point.
Well, let me show you some of Andrew Wyeth's work, who I'm sure you consider to be one of the great artists of our time. This piece, for instance, Christina's World, invokes a serious emotional response and displays extreme artistic skill, just like Rothko. And yet, isn't this piece of art driven by a narrative? We as a viewer are encouraged to explore the events shown here, just as an illustrator helps to describe a story.
Well, don't be so silly. I'm sure if you asked Andrew, he would tell you that it isn't about stories, but about the feelings represented in the picture. It makes us feel lonely. That's what matters in real art.
What about Edward Hopper, then, whose pictures are like snapshots of people's lives, obviously containing some kind of sequence of events for us to puzzle out, an underlying story? He's a true artist, but stories drive his work.
We're getting bogged down in the same argument here. Let's be frank. The real dividing line is that illustration is always bound by commercial gain far more than art is. The illustrator never has the same control or freedom of expression because he or she is so confined by the demands of money and the needs of the author. Of course artists make money from their work, but that is never their sole aim, never their primary stimulus.
That's so hypocritical. That may have once been true, but art is increasingly profit-driven. I mean, look at Damien Hirst, a millionaire who made money from his colored dot works put on everything, from T-shirts to coffee mugs, and art is now marketed commercially for big money. Just look in any art gallery gift shop where mayonnaise umbrellas are sold on tea towels. Doesn't this all show that these boundaries between art and illustration, profit and creativity, are slipping away?
Quite possibly, I suppose. But there are many artists who don't sell out like that.
Surely we're blowing this all out of proportion. It's all a question of degrees. I mean, look at this diagram. You can see there are artists and illustrators that sit firmly on either side of the line. But in these modern times, increasingly, there are many more who blur these boundaries or ignore them altogether. Should we not consider the likes of Alan Aldridge?
Well, if we're going to bring that acid-taking leftist hippie into this discussion, it's not worth having.
I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we appear to be experiencing some technical difficulties.